The betrayal. Captain Ilara Voss stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Olive Branch, watching as the massive crystalline structure of the Galactic Conclave headquarters rotated majestically against the backdrop of the nebula known as the Celestial Veil. Its sweeping arches and gleaming spires represented 5,000 years of interspecies cooperation, or so the official records claimed. "Captain, the delegation is assembled and ready for transport," said Lieutenant Chen, her second in command. "The Arbiter's Council will receive us in 30 minutes. Ilara nodded, her reflection in the viewport showing a woman in her 40s with sharp features and analytical eyes that had seen too much during the border wars. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her dress uniform bore the single platinum star of Earth's diplomatic fleet. "Is Ambassador Kumar prepared?" she asked. "As much as anyone can be when facing 17 different species who still consider us the galactic newcomers," Chen replied with a thin smile. Humanity had joined the Conclave only 15 years ago, after their experimental quantum drive accidentally pierced the barrier between normal space and the hyperlanes the older species had been using for millennia. It had been a rocky integration, with many of the established powers viewing humans as unpredictable, expansionist, and dangerously innovative. As they prepared to board the shuttle, Ilara's personal communicator vibrated against her wrist with a priority message. She frowned. All official communications should have gone through the ship's central system. The message contained only a set of coordinates within the conclave station and a cryptic phrase. "The truth isn't buried deep. Look for file GC 927/A. Lieutenant, inform the ambassador I'll be slightly delayed." "Routine security check," she said, making a quick decision. The coordinates led her to a rarely used maintenance corridor in the station's lower levels. Waiting there was Ven Kelix, a Saurian diplomat she'd worked with during the Proxima negotiations. His scaled face showed signs of extreme agitation, the ridge of spines along his skull fully extended, a sign of fear among his kind. "Captain Voss, I risk everything by meeting you here," he said, his four-fingered hand extending a data crystal. "But I cannot stand by while atrocity is committed. You've been fair to my people, so I repay that fairness now." "What's this about, Ven?" she asked, taking the crystal cautiously. "The Inner Council voted yesterday. The measure passed 7-3. His vertical pupils contracted to thin slits. "They're calling it the Human Containment Initiative, but the name is a euphemism." A cold feeling settled in Ilara's stomach. Containment of what kind? The militarists won the argument. "They've classified humanity as an existential threat to conclave stability due to your species' rate of technological advancement. The 7 major powers fear that within a century, humans will surpass them." His voice dropped to a whisper. "They've authorized preemptive strikes against all major human settlements outside your home system. It begins today." Ilara's military training took over, pushing aside the shock. "How reliable is this information?" "I serve on the Resource Allocation Committee. The fleet movements were disguised as exercises, but I saw the targeting data." His scales shifted color slightly, a sign of deep distress. 17 colonies, nearly 30 million lives. "Why are you telling me this? Your career, your life." "Because my species remembers what it means to face extinction. We were nearly wiped out by the Drakshid Empire before the Conclave intervened. I cannot be party to such an action against another sentient species." He stepped back. "The data crystal contains proof and the complete battle plan. You have perhaps 2 hours before they realize it's missing." Ilara's mind raced through options. The Olive Branch carried no weapons. It was a diplomatic vessel. Communications would certainly be monitored, and even at maximum speed, warnings would reach only the closest colonies in time. "Thank you," she said simply. "My people won't forget this. I hope they survive to remember." Ven Kelix replied grimly. "Now go. Different paths, different turbolifts. They must not connect us." Ilara made her way back toward the docking bay rather than the council chambers, moving with deliberate calm, while sending a coded message to Lieutenant Chen to prepare the ship for emergency departure. As she passed through a main concourse, she saw representatives from dozens of species going about their diplomatic business, completely unaware of the atrocity that was about to be committed with their government's approval. The data crystal burned in her pocket like a live coal. She had almost reached the docking bay when the station's lighting shifted to a deep purple, an alert status she'd never seen before. Announcements in the conclave's official language echoed through the corridors, and species around her reacted with confusion or alarm. "Captain." Chen's voice came through her communicator. "The station's security forces are sealing all docks. They're claiming there's a biological containment breach from one of the human colonies. It had already begun. The biological containment story would be the pretext for quarantining all human vessels and preventing warnings from reaching the colonies. Override protocols, Lieutenant. Get the engines hot. We're leaving now, with or without clearance. That's a direct violation of conclave law. They're about to murder 30 million people, Chen. Conclave law be damned." She broke into a run, pushing past confused diplomats. Two conclave security officers, tall, mantis-like fractions, moved to intercept her, their crystalline stun batons activated. "Citizen, return to designated safety areas," one chittered through its translator. Ilara had been a tactical officer before her diplomatic posting. She dropped low, sweeping the first guard's spindly legs from under it, while simultaneously driving an elbow into the second one's thoracic breathing apparatus. Neither was prepared for physical resistance from a supposedly civilized diplomat. Alarms blared as she sprinted the final distance to the docking bay, where Chen had the ship's engines already cycling up to departure thrust. "We're locked down, Captain," he shouted as she vaulted through the airlock. "Magnetic clamps are engaged. Override them. Burn them out if you have to. That could damage our hull. Just do it." As the olive branch strained against its restraints, Ilara connected the data crystal to the ship's computer, frantically searching for file GC 927/8. What she found made her blood run cold. The file contained not just the battle plans, but the full strategic assessment of humanity that had led to the extermination order. The Conclave had been monitoring human development with increasing alarm for years. Unlike most species, which followed predictable technological development curves, humans made intuitive leaps that defied statistical modeling. More disturbingly, humans showed a unique ability to adapt alien technologies, often finding applications the original developers never considered. This technological appropriation tendency was listed as a primary threat factor. A violent shudder ran through the ship as Chen overloaded the docking clamps, fusing them but gaining the ship's freedom. The olive branch pulled away from the station as warning shots from Conclave security vessels flashed past their viewport. "Set course for the New Washington colony," Ilara ordered, her voice tight with urgency. "Maximum speed. And prepare a warning broadcast on all emergency frequencies." "New Washington is 11 hours away at top speed," Chen said, his hands flying over the navigation controls. "Then we pray we're not too late." Ilara stared at the holographic display, showing the 17 targeted colonies, each represented by a pulsing red dot against the starfield. 30 million men, women, and children, most of whom had left Earth seeking peaceful new lives on distant worlds. 6 hours into their desperate journey, the first reports began coming in. The colony on Proxima Centauri II was gone, hit by kinetic bombardment from orbit. No survivors reported. Then New Eden. Then Gliese Station. By the time they reached New Washington, the colony was already under attack. From orbit, they watched helplessly as precision strikes from Conclave warships systematically destroyed the colony's major population centers. The olive branch was unarmed, unable to intervene. "Continue broadcasting the warning," Ilara said, her voice hollow as she watched the destruction below. "And set course for Earth. The homeworld needs to know what's happened here." As the ship accelerated away from the devastated colony, Lieutenant Chen approached her privately. What will Earth do, Captain? The conclave outnumbers us hundreds to one. Ilara turned from the viewport, her face set in lines of grim determination. What humanity has always done when backed into a corner, Lieutenant. We'll fight. And God help the conclave when we do, because we won't be fighting for conquest or resources or pride. Her eyes reflected the dying fires of New Washington as they jumped to faster-than-light travel. We'll be fighting for vengeance. The Resistance. 6 months after what became known as the Colony Massacre, Captain Ilara Voss, now Admiral Voss by necessity rather than formal promotion, stood in the command center of Sanctuary Base, hidden deep within an asteroid field in what had once been neutral space. The chamber was carved directly from the rock, with equipment salvaged from a dozen different sources creating a patchwork of human and alien technology. Status report, she said to the haggard officers gathered around the holographic display table. The Meridian shipyards have been completely evacuated, reported Commander Chen, now her executive officer. We salvaged 62% of the industrial equipment before the conclave forces arrived. The rest was destroyed to prevent capture. Another officer, a former mining colony administrator named Keller, stepped forward. Refugee processing is at 118% of capacity. We've converted storage areas to living quarters, but conditions are deteriorating. Ilara nodded grimly. In the months since the massacre, humanity had been driven to the brink. Earth itself remained largely untouched. The 7 major conclave powers were still debating the political implications of attacking humanity's homeworld directly. But every off-world colony and installation had either been destroyed or evacuated. The conclave's official position was that they were containing a dangerous biological contaminant originating from human settlements. Few actually believed this, but it provided the political cover needed for the largest genocide in the galaxy's recent history. And the Phoenix Project? Ilara asked, turning to Dr. Sanjay Kapoor, formerly Earth's leading xenotechnologist, now head of Sanctuary's research division. We've made a breakthrough, Dr. Kapoor said, his eyes bright despite the exhaustion evident in his slumped shoulders. It's ready for operational testing. A ripple of interest went through the officers. Phoenix was their greatest hope, and their greatest secret. Show me, Ilara ordered. In the makeshift laboratory deep within the asteroid, Dr. Kapoor's team had been working around the clock, reverse engineering captured conclave technology. What they had discovered was revolutionary. The fundamental architecture of conclave systems is based on crystalline quantum computing, Kapoor explained as he led Ilara through the lab. They've refined it over thousands of years, creating systems of remarkable efficiency and power. This isn't news, Doctor, Ilara said impatiently. No, but this is. He gestured to a neural interface helmet connected to a disassembled conclave weapons system. For the past 6 months, we've been trying to interface with their tech using our traditional computing methods. That was the wrong approach. He picked up the helmet. The conclave species all evolved along similar neurological patterns. Their brains process information in highly structured, hierarchical ways. Their technology is designed to respond to those patterns. And human brains don't work that way, Ilara surmised. Precisely. Kapoor's excitement was palpable. Human cognition is associative, lateral, sometimes even chaotic by conclave standards. When we first tried to interface directly with their systems, we got error messages or system crashes. We thought that meant incompatibility. But it doesn't. It means we were hitting their systems in ways they never anticipated. He handed her the helmet. Try it. With some hesitation, Ilara put on the neural interface. Immediately, her mind was flooded with information, not in the orderly streams a conclave user would experience, but as an intuitive, almost synesthetic rush of concepts and connections. This is incredible, she breathed. It's like I can feel the weapon systems. Better than that, Kapoor said. You can access functions and capabilities the conclave doesn't even know exist in their own technology. Their structured thinking prevents them from seeing the creative applications. Ilara removed the helmet, her mind racing with implications. Can this be weaponized? It already has been, Kapoor replied, leading her to a hangar bay where a captured Conclave scout ship waited. We've modified this vessel with human-compatible neural interfaces. A human pilot can fly it more effectively than the original crew could, and access defensive and offensive capabilities that were always present in the system architecture, but never utilized. For the first time in months, Ilara felt a spark of genuine hope. This could change everything. How quickly can we implement this across our remaining fleet? We've already begun production of the interface units. Within 2 weeks, every salvaged Conclave vessel could be operational under human control. 2 weeks later, Sanctuary launched its first offensive operation. 3 modified Conclave vessels, piloted by humans using the neural interfaces, attacked a Conclave supply depot in the TAS-CD system. The defending forces were completely unprepared for their own technology being used against them with capabilities they didn't know existed. The raid was a resounding success. Not only did the human forces capture critical supplies, but they also retrieved intact Conclave computer cores that would yield even more technological secrets. This is just the beginning, Ilara told her officers after the successful raid. For 6 months, we've been running and hiding. Now we fight back. Over the next 3 months, human forces conducted dozens of hit-and-run attacks against Conclave targets. Each raid provided more captured technology, which Dr. Kapoor's team integrated into humanity's growing shadow fleet. More importantly, each success boosted morale among the refugees and surviving military personnel. The Conclave responded with increasing alarm. Their methodical, predictable strategies were ineffective against the guerrilla tactics employed by the humans. Worse, they couldn't understand how their own technology was being used so effectively against them. In a secure communication chamber, Ilara spoke with their sole ally within the Conclave, Ven Kelix, who had continued to provide intelligence at great personal risk. The inner council is in disarray, the Saurian reported, his image distorted by multiple encryption layers. The 7 who voted for the Human Containment Initiative are blaming each other for its failure. 3 major species have formally withdrawn their support for the operation. But the attacks continue, Ilara noted. Yes, the Draconian and Fraxian fleets are now leading the effort, with the Morrigan providing technological support. They're developing new security protocols specifically designed to counter human neural patterns. How close are they? Months away, at least. Their rigid thinking makes it difficult for them to model human cognitive processes. His scaled face showed what passed for a smile among his kind. In their arrogance, they never studied your species thoroughly. They saw your technological achievements but failed to understand the minds behind them. This gave Ilara an idea. What about the Conclave's primary communication hub in the Vega sector? Our intelligence suggests it coordinates all military operations in that quadrant. Ven Kelix's spines flattened in surprise. The Nexus? It's one of their most heavily defended installations. Defended against conventional attacks, Ilara specified. But what about a team using our neural interface advantage? Could we capture it intact? The security implications would be... He paused, calculating. If you controlled the Nexus, you could potentially monitor all Conclave communications in that sector, possibly even issue false orders. Exactly. The plan took weeks to develop. Unlike their previous hit-and-run operations, capturing the Nexus would require not just attacking, but holding the installation long enough to extract its communication protocols and encryption keys. The strike force consisted of 5 modified Conclave vessels and 300 human soldiers, a significant portion of humanity's remaining military strength. Ilara would command the operation personally from the flagship, a repurposed Fraxian cruiser they had renamed Nemesis. As they prepared to depart Sanctuary, Dr. Kapoor approached with a final update. We've improved the neural interfaces, he said, handing her a new model. This version allows for deeper integration with Conclave systems. You'll experience their technology almost as an extension of your own body. Any side effects? She asked, examining the sleek device. Some users report sensory bleed-through, phantom sensations from the ship's systems. Nothing dangerous, but disorienting at first. As Ilara placed the new interface on her temples, she immediately understood what he meant. The Nemesis wasn't just a ship she was controlling. It felt like part of her nervous system had expanded to encompass the vessel's hull, engines, and weapons. "This is remarkable," she said softly. Kapoor nodded. "We're just beginning to understand the possibilities. The real question isn't how we can use their technology. It's why they never used it to its full potential themselves." The strike force departed under strict communications blackout, using a series of calculated jumps through uninhabited systems to avoid detection. When they finally arrived at the edge of the Vega system, the Nexus installation hung before them, a massive structure of interconnected rings surrounding a central hub. "No alerts," reported the tactical officer. "They haven't detected us." Using the stolen access codes from previous raids, the human vessels approached the installation broadcasting identification signals that registered them as maintenance ships. It wasn't until they were within docking range that the facility's commander realized something was wrong. "Unidentified vessels, halt your approach," came the Conclave transmission. "Authentication codes rejected. Defense systems activating." "Now," Ilara ordered. All 5 ships simultaneously activated their neural interfaces. The human pilots mentally connected to the installation's defense grid, creating thought patterns that the automated systems couldn't properly process. Weapon platforms that should have targeted them swiveled harmlessly away. Shield generators cycled through random configurations, creating gaps the human ships exploited. "We're in their systems," Commander Chen reported, initiating docking procedures. Inside the installation, chaos reigned as systems failed or acted unpredictably. By the time the Conclave defenders organized a response, human forces had already secured the main docking bay. The battle for the Nexus was brief but intense. Conclave security forces fought desperately, but they were hampered by malfunctioning systems and confusion about which areas had been breached. 3 hours after the attack began, Ilara stood in the installation's command center, surveying their prize. "Nexus control secured," she reported to Sanctuary Base, beginning data extraction. As her teams worked to download the Conclave's communication protocols and encryption keys, Ilara studied the facility's design. Something about it seemed oddly familiar, as though the neural interface was triggering some deep recognition. That was when she made the discovery that would change the course of the war and humanity's understanding of its place in the galaxy. The Reckoning. In the central data core of the Nexus, Admiral Ilara Voss stared at the ancient files her neural interface had unexpectedly accessed. These weren't military communications or strategic plans. They were historical records, buried under layers of encryption and hidden from all but the highest levels of Conclave leadership. "Dr. Kapoor needs to see this," she murmured, transferring the data to a secure drive. The information was explosive. Humanity wasn't the evolutionary accident the Conclave had claimed. According to these classified records, humans were the descendants of an ancient species called the progenitors, the same species that had founded the original Conclave over 20,000 years ago, before mysteriously disappearing. The 7 major powers had known this all along. Their attack on human colonies wasn't just about preventing a potential future threat. It was about suppressing a species that might eventually discover its heritage and claim its rightful place in galactic leadership. "Extraction complete," reported Commander Chen. "All communication protocols and encryption keys secured. Demolition charges set in non-essential areas as ordered." Ilara nodded absently, her mind still processing the implications of what she'd discovered. "Begin withdrawal procedures. We've got what we came for." The captured Nexus data transformed the conflict. With access to the Conclave's military communications, human forces could anticipate and counter every move. More importantly, they could now broadcast the truth about the colony massacre and humanity's heritage directly to every species in the Conclave. At Sanctuary Base, Dr. Kapoor confirmed what Ilara had discovered. The genetic markers are unmistakable, he explained to the assembled leadership. Humans share approximately 82% of our advanced neural architecture, with the progenitor samples preserved in these records. That's why our brains interface so effectively with their technology. At a fundamental level, it was designed for minds like ours. Why would they hide this? Asked Keller. Power, Ilara said simply. The 7 major species that voted for our extermination are the same ones that have controlled the conclave since the progenitors vanished. They've built their entire civilization using technologies they barely understand, inherited from a species they supposedly replaced. And then we appeared, Kapoor continued, accidentally discovering the hyperlanes, rapidly advancing, intuitively understanding technologies that took them centuries to master. We weren't just a political threat. We were living proof that they weren't the rightful heirs to the progenitors' legacy. The revelation galvanized the human resistance. Within weeks, they launched Operation Homecoming, a coordinated offensive against key conclave military installations across 3 sectors. Using their neural interface advantage and the stolen communication protocols, human forces struck with devastating effectiveness. Conclave fleets found themselves receiving contradictory orders or responding to phantom threats, while the real attacks came from unexpected vectors. Installations that should have been impregnable fell as their automated defenses were turned against them by human operators using neural interfaces in ways their designers never anticipated. 6 months after the capture of the Nexus, Ilara stood on the bridge of the Nemesis, now the flagship of a fleet of over 100 vessels, some captured, some built in secret human shipyards, all enhanced with the neural interface technology. The Phyrexian defense fleet is withdrawing from the Rigel sector, Chen reported. That's the 3rd major force to retreat this week. And the conclave leadership, still barricaded in the central chamber of the headquarters, they've rejected all communication attempts. Ilara nodded grimly. Then we go to them. The assault on the conclave headquarters, the same gleaming structure she had visited as a diplomatic captain over a year ago, was the most ambitious operation of the war. Not only was it heavily defended, but it held tremendous symbolic importance for all species in the galaxy. As the human fleet emerged from hyperspace near the Celestial Veil Nebula, the defenders were already in disarray. The truth about humanity's heritage and the colony massacre had spread throughout the ranks, causing many ships to defect or stand down rather than fight. We're receiving a transmission, Chen said, surprise evident in his voice. It's from Ven Kelix. He says the Saurian fleet has secured the outer defenses and requests coordination for the final approach. The Saurians weren't alone. 3 other species whose representatives had opposed the human containment initiative had joined forces with the human fleet. What had begun as humanity's desperate struggle for survival had evolved into a revolution against the Conclave's corrupt leadership. The battle was brief but decisive, with multiple species now fighting alongside humanity and using the neural interface technology. The headquarters' defenses were quickly overwhelmed. Ilara led the boarding party personally, striding through the same corridors she had once fled as a hunted fugitive. In the Grand Council chamber, the 7 leaders who had ordered the colony massacre awaited. The Phyrexian High Minister, the eldest and most powerful among them, rose as Ilara entered. You have won a tactical victory, human, the insectoid being chittered through its translator. But you cannot hope to replace the order we have maintained for millennia. The galaxy requires stability, not the chaos your kind brings. Ilara approached slowly, the neural interface at her temples gleaming. We don't want to replace you. We never did. All we wanted was to exist, to grow, to learn. You feared us because we reminded you of your own inadequacy, caretakers who could never fully understand the legacy you guarded. She activated a holographic display showing the ancient progenitor records. We know the truth now. The progenitors didn't vanish. They seeded themselves across thousands of worlds, including Earth. They wanted to evolve, to grow in different environments, to someday return with new perspectives and knowledge. The chamber had filled with representatives from dozens of species, all witnessing the confrontation. The conclave was meant to be a place of cooperation and growth, Ilara continued, addressing the wider audience, not a tool for maintaining the power of a few over the many. "What do you propose, then?" asked the Morrigan delegate, their luminous eyes narrowed with suspicion. "A new conclave, one that honors the original vision of the progenitors, no species dominating another. No secrets, no massacres justified as containment. A true galactic community where diversity is seen as strength, not a threat." Over the next several weeks, representatives from all conclave species engaged in intense negotiations. The 7 major powers that had ordered the colony massacre were removed from leadership positions, their military capabilities placed under joint oversight to prevent retaliation. In recognition of their actions during the conflict, the Saurians were elevated to a senior council position, and humanity, despite the devastation they had suffered, was officially acknowledged as a genetic descendant species of the progenitors, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. 1 year to the day after the colony massacre, Ilara stood in the rebuilt council chamber, now serving as Earth's official representative to the new conclave. "The rebuilding of New Washington Colony has begun," reported Van Calix, now her colleague rather than a clandestine ally. "The other destroyed colonies will follow." "It won't bring back the dead," Ilara said quietly. "No," the Saurian agreed, "but it honors their memory by creating the future they should have had." Dr. Kapoor had continued his research into the neural interface technology, making it accessible to other species with compatible neurological structures. The sharing of this technology had broken down barriers that had existed for millennia, creating new possibilities for cooperation and understanding. As Ilara looked out at the assembled representatives, she reflected on the terrible cost that had brought them to this point. 30 million human lives lost in the initial massacre, countless more in the war that followed. Yet from that tragedy had emerged a fundamental transformation of galactic society. "We have a saying on Earth," she told the assembled delegates as they prepared to vote on the final charter of the new conclave. "From the ashes, we rise." The phoenix was a mythical bird that would be consumed by fire, only to be reborn stronger than before. She activated a holographic display showing the plans for a memorial to be built on each of the massacre sites, a silver phoenix rising toward the stars. "Today, we are all reborn, not as separate species competing for dominance, but as inheritors of a shared legacy. The progenitors didn't disappear. They became us, all of us, in our infinite diversity. And together, we will build something greater than they ever imagined." The vote was unanimous. A new era had begun. As the delegates dispersed, Ilara stood alone at the viewport, looking out at the nebula that had been her first sight of the conclave so long ago. The same view, but everything had changed. "Captain, excuse me." "Admiral," Chen corrected himself as he approached. "Some habits died hard. The Earth delegation is ready to depart when you are." Ilara smiled slightly. "You know, I think I'll stay a while longer. There's still so much work to be done." Chen nodded understanding. "The hardest part isn't winning the war. It's building the peace that follows." "Exactly." She turned from the stars to face the chamber where representatives of 100 species now mingled freely. "And this time, we'll build it right."